And welcome back. The Madlanga Commission has been hearing testimony on how the instruction to disband the political killing SARS team created significant tension within the South African Police Services headquarters. Acting Deputy National Police Commissioner for Crime Detection, Hilda Senthumule, testified about the strain this decision placed on her relationship with then-boss Shadrack Sibiya, describing it as touch and go, where one day she could be in his good books and the next, for no reason, in his bad books. Senthumule has also revealed the challenges she faced coordinating the audit and handover of 121 dockets from the PKTT while managing a busy schedule, highlighting the operational and managerial pressures involved. While she opposed the decision to dissolve the task team, she did not fully articulate her stance during the testimony. Joining us now to unpack this is Professor Khulofelo Rakubu. But first, let's take a look at this.
General Sibiya was adamant that actual General Khumalo shouldn't be heading the PKTT. It's a detective matter, which I differ because it's a combat matter, and therefore the dockets must come to me. He was adamant through inquiries, through like asking to say how far are we, but further, he was preoccupied with the notion that General Khumalo and crime intelligence were investigating him. And I remember him saying in Zulu, it
sounds to me as though it would have been a handover for handover's sake. It just didn't make sense. Because from your testimony, the dockets are at head office and they immediately had to be back in KZN by April. So why on earth did they have to come to head office? I just do not understand. It's not your problem.
No, I understand.
You did not disband the PKTT. You did not say that the dockets must come to head office. But I'm just trying to understand what was going on here.
Let's unpack this now with Professor Khulofelo Rakubu. Prof, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. I think we've heard enough testimony now about the 121 dockets for us to be able to say it seems like Shadrack Sibiya had acted outside the confines of the extent of his power and that almost no one in his orbit seemed to have agreed with it, despite having executed the instructions that he issued to them. Is it conclusive in your mind at this point whether or not there's any sort of contravention on part of Shadrack Sibiya around these 121 dockets?
Thank you for having me. Good morning. With the recent testimony, it is clear and definitely that Sibiya acted out of his mandate. This is a very critical testimony, and I think he should have been invited earlier because remember she sits at the intersection of your operational policing and strategic oversight because her testimony yesterday reflect both your ground level realities and systemic challenges. So she was able to take South Africans through how this decision was contested, how this decision were questioned, and how and which part Sibiya played in ensuring that there's a disbandment or there's a communication around the disbandment. So we categorize her testimony as a corroborative testimony because she comes in to align her statement with those of Khumalo and many others. But again, it was more of an expose with elements of direct evidence. Yeah. Because she revealed this. Yeah.
So I want us to sketch it out a little bit and chronologically so if we can. The original testimony or the original account we heard from General Mkwanazi, however, quite speculative by his own admission at the time, is that after he had seen the text exchanges between Brown Mokotsi, Ket Matlala, as well as linking the relationship Brown Mokotsi has with the minister, he was then able to determine that, oh, these dockets were removed so that they can determine whether or not the work that the PKTT was doing in Gauteng had implicated Ket Matlala and whether or not he was actively being investigated because they had no other idea of figuring that out except to take hold of these dockets. That's what Mkwanazi had speculated. We then heard from Shadrack Sibiya that no, these dockets were taken because the instruction was to disband And it just made sense for these dockets to go to a detective and investigative team rather than a combat team, right? Which is what the PKTT was. They don't have any detective capabilities. And because they no longer existed, they then became the property of national department. Of course, Mkhwanazi also disputed that. We then heard from officials in the department, including now Senthumule, that one official saying, this was brought to my office for audit purposes. Another official saying, actually it was brought for safekeeping. It's quite unclear which it is. The central question is, when Shadrack Sibiya had given out the instruction for these dockets to be removed from KZN to Gauteng, was it because he was trying to interfere with the investigations that was actively unfolding within the PKTT? And it doesn't seem to me that that answer is quite definitive yet. How do you think the commission will have to evaluate the evidence before them to answer that question?
It's a mammoth task for the commission to determine the reasons behind the handling of the dockets. But from Senthumule's testimony, it is clear that she did not have or an understanding why those dockets were supposed to come to her. And she clearly specified that where they were held initially, that's where they should have been. And should they be moved, the process was not thorough. But the commission will have to identify why, although Senthumule strategically placed with all the powers, because like I said, she sits in the intersection of operational policing and strategic oversight. She did not agree with the disbandment. Obviously, she would not agree or advise on the removal or mishandling of the or transportation of the those dockets. She had no powers to take those dockets. That is why she even took us to certain evidence to indicate she wrote an email or to indicate that she does not think there should be a disbandment. And because she understood her position, she then wrote in the email that those dockets should remain and handled where they are supposed to be handled, whether combat powers or investigative powers. She clearly understood that where they were initially placed, the handling should be done thoroughly. And since she did not understand, in her vocabulary, there's no such thing as an urgent or immediate disbandment. So it's clear that from her position, they were never supposed to be moved anyway, because the minute you move them, then you obviously interfere with investigation. And at this moment, it looks like the intention was to disrupt or to mishandle certain investigation, to compromise investigation and investigators.
Yeah, we heard earlier a testimony from General Mkhwanazi at the start of the Madlanga Commission that, in fact, a docket is not the property of an investigator. It's not the property of a province. Neither is it the property of the National Department. An investigation docket is always the property of the police station where the case was registered. And should there be a disbandment of a team, a specialized team, or whatever the case may be, that the dockets ought to go to the police station where the case was registered, because it is the property of that police station. Do we get a sense from Senthumule's testimony around that question, around where the rightful ownership of the dockets lay?
She largely placed all powers that be at the provincial level, right? And at the provincial level, and where that docket should be located. That is why the move from wherever the dockets were was found unnecessary, because obviously the consent station, the mother body of that docket, was not consulted, or therefore that docket can never be protected, should now be moved from that province. So from her testimony, although not clear, she places all the powers with Mkhwanazi or the provincial office. Obviously, that provincial office will then manage or oversee the placement of that docket in that particular station, like you said, that docket remains the property of a concerned police station. Therefore, removing them, meaning how many police stations are now concerned,
Yeah.
if now they are all moved. Therefore, that's why there's a discrepancy in moving them, because none of the police stations were even mentioned. Nonetheless, even the national, the provincial commissioner of where those police stations are based.
And just a last question, and this is less on the substance, but more on what the Commission would have to think about in the recommendations. And we've quite clearly seen a sequence of officials executing demands and executing orders from their seniors, even though they know those orders are unlawful and they do not have the power to execute those orders. But nonetheless, they do it because if they don't, they would be guilty of insubordination on the other hand. How do we safeguard, and the Commission will have to answer this, but how do we safeguard officials from executing unlawful instructions that they do not have power from, even though those instructions may come from their seniors and their principals?
From all these testimonies, a systemic corruption within the policing structure emerged, which comes with those unauthorized or illegal instructions, which then impacted on the normalization of criminal behaviors within institution. Then the Commission will have to look and to find or recommend a suitable systemic reform mechanism, because there are issues of the institutional oversight. How do they then recommend on strengthening those in oversight bodies? What should be done? What should be changed? Which policies can be tightened up to ensure that there's all that protection? Because it largely looks like that has been the norm, that has been the order of the day. Fear has been infiltrated. Unlawful instructions have been given. But then should there be mechanisms in place to strengthen oversight bodies? Obviously, men and women in blue, like Mkwanas, will have an understanding of where to go and receive necessary protection from the seniors that will be provided, that will be advising on unlawful instructions. Oversight bodies and the right structural reform, because we've got structural issues here, overstepping issues, political infiltration, systemic corruption that has created a criminogenic environment where corruption itself becomes a driver of crime, and also the entrenchment of organized crime that we have seen, because now criminal groups are thriving under corrupt policing.
Yeah. Prof. Rakubu, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. Really do appreciate it. That is criminologist Professor Khulofelo Rakubu talking to us there on the testimony that we heard this week at the Madlanga Commission.